Hello and welcome to another of our Hardman talks, which is a series of introductions to interesting key people that Hardman has met through its client relationship network. I am Michael Foster. I'm one of the analysts and a principal at Hardman. I'd like to introduce Anthony Frieze, who I believe you've been recently appointed as the MD of Red Ribbon Fund Management. So if you can tell us a bit more about that, it'll be really interesting to hear more.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. I was rather alarmed when I heard that Hardman Talk wanted to interview me, because it sounds rather like that BBC programme where they skewer people on Hard Talk. Anyway, I'm sure you're going to be much nicer. Anyway, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Hardman. Anthony Frieze is my name. I've been appointed as MD of Red Ribbon Fund Management, which is a Gibraltar incorporated-based business, which is focusing on listing and hosting of funds and bonds using our experienced investor fund licenses from the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission. So it's a very exciting appointment. And Red Ribbon Fund Management itself is the subsidiary of UK PLC, Red Ribbon Asset Management PLC, which is an Indo-British business focusing on the bi-directional flows, indeed developing the bi-directional flows of capital between the UK and India in a post-Brexit world. And I guess our business is driven by that, the long-term story about India, but also precepts of investment precepts of mainstream impact investment, etc., which we can talk about in more detail later.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been very interested about in India is obviously the political changes over the past several years, which have been designed to boost the economy for the inhabitants, but also to do that through bringing in international capital. And that has been reflected, clearly in capital markets, but there's quoted and unquoted. So can you give us a little bit more about the company background and whether this is focused on unquoted investments, whether there's any particular sector of the economy, and also your expertise in those particular sectors that Red Ribbon is looking at?
Sure. Well, the fund, the business itself is involved in launching incubating several particular sectors. One is this is at the sort of the top co level, but this informs the rest of the business's strategy, I suppose. So in the case of Red Ribbon Asset Management, we have something called Modulex, which is a modular construction company, which involves a construction of a factory and the development of the modular building techniques and technology, which is incredibly sustainable, but also offered at a very competitive price. We're also launching a series of eco hotels under the branding Eco Hotels, and there's a crossover between the modular construction business and the hotels we'll be building using that technology. So that's I think those are sort of the two things that have been long established as part of the Red Ribbon offering. What we've moved into in terms of financial services with Red Ribbon Fund Management is developing a series or hosting a series of funds building on those sectors. And so the recent fund that we've launched is the Red Ribbon Indian Real Estate Fund, which is investing in the Indian property market in a sustainable way, and will over time be no doubt using the technologies that the modular construction technologies that the firm itself is also developing. So there are crossovers there. In terms of other funds that we're launching, there is certainly a focus on property, with a green hotel fund currently in pipeline, and also a sort of more mainstream UK property business. Each of them have connections through the Indian diaspora, through either being launched with partnership partners who are well established, several generations Indian families in the UK, but clearly building on the opportunities to develop and attract capital from India, from families in the UK, and also families resident in India. So once again, you can see we're sort of drawing together the Red Ribbon's network of connections to build an investment case in those chosen sectors. Now, I must make a confession, Mike. My background is not in property. My background is in mainstream banking, where I was essentially a relationship manager and a product specialist in a field of securities lending. So for about 20 years in the city, I was involved with building businesses in the collateral management securities lending field, where we were lending assets on behalf of large central banks and sovereign wealth funds. So essentially, my background is relationship management, but a long history of experience overseas. So I spent a lot of time looking after clients in the Middle East, in India, South Asia, and also spent some time in Hong Kong. So I think I suppose my skills would be more in the what you might call the soft skills department, in terms of having a sort of a real breadth of experience with cultures and countries around the world. I think that is quite important in the way, you know, dealing with a sort of a complex culture like India's, and the interrelationships that we have with it and with investors around the world. Being able to draw those together, I think, is a particular skill which I certainly hope I'm bringing to the organization.
Yeah, and I know Red Ribbon and yourself were clearly very involved in the Indian diaspora. So as you say, sort of understanding how Indian nationals and international people are wanting structures to be formed.
Yep.
And clearly the formation of the structure is a really key part of getting international money into some sensible projects. So in terms of sensible, you mentioned quite a lot of ESG or the environmental side anyway.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's a theory that, you know, as societies progress in wealth, you get to a certain stage where there is a natural change in view within those societies towards the environment. So it's interesting to see how India will progress on that. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts as to what pull there is from India on these environmental criteria, and then what push there is from the investors. You know, clearly you highlighted it in pretty much all the examples that you gave on the modular building, the hotels, and property generally. So the push and the pull, and why you particularly.
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, the traditional view is that if you're still in the developing world space, then you can't afford to or don't want to consider investment approaches which are traditionally perceived as perhaps crimping investment returns. But I mean, that's not how we see it, and I think that's a very important point to make. So, you know, our MII, main impact investment, is really about building a resilient economy, in which well-governed businesses are, you know, trying to reduce their environmental impact. So you ask, how does that impact, you know, India? What's the draw of that? Well, I mean, India has got a massively growing population, growing by, you know, the size of Australia every year.
Yeah.
It's the pressure that is going to put on the economy, the ecology, and of course the wider impact on the world is well understood. And it's probably very well understood in the culture of India too. I think that's an important point to make. I mean, there is, long before these things became voguish, a respect for the environment and you know, mankind and animal kind was certainly a very important part of India's culture. So I think that's important. But I mean, the fact is, on a more brass tacks level, the country's got to support a population which is going to be in excess of 1.4 billion people. And the fact is, you cannot keep on building new houses, new schools, and 20,000 schools a year are going to be needed over the next 20 years in India to respond to the demands for education and the growing population. So you can just, that number is sheerly mind-boggling. That cannot be sustained and cannot be done based upon the current usage of concrete and the depredation of the environment using sands in either in coastal areas or in the sea. That is understood. So there's no choice here, really. And I think that's what's interesting from I think the broader Indian perspective is there is no choice here. This is the way to go in order to provide a future for the growing and very, very young Indian population that is going to be viable and successful and pleasant.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's, so I'm preaching somewhat, but I mean, it's it's an important part of what we do, and we have a very strong attraction and pull from India for it.
Going with the grain, and certainly, politically there, the structures seem to be being set up, and you are structuring your funds and your flow of channeling of funds through structures that do take this very seriously. So talking about the structure, because Red Ribbon is there, I would see it as to provide the structure as well as the local expertise and knowledge.
Yes.
And I hear that there's a white label fund service being set up by Red Ribbon. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I will, with pleasure. Thank you. So the Indian real estate fund I'm talking about is actually not part of that, because that's only offered through our partnership with Limestone platform in Luxembourg. But the main drive of our business is our white label fund business, which we're offering and which I'm heading up. That's my new role as MD, being offered through our Gibraltar hosting platform. And essentially what that does is allow fund managers and also principally fund managers with a great expertise in their chosen strategy to launch a fund in an efficient and cost-effective way. So we can launch a fund in around 10 weeks for a fixed fee of £35,000. And we work with investment managers who have a particular expertise in their area, and also have an ability to distribute the funds amongst their target investors. But also, we would also like to see, and we want to work with partners who share our commitment to mainstream impact investment. But it's called white label because essentially you're using our platform, but it's using your branding, your distribution, your expertise. So our license basically allows you to launch in this cost-effective way a frugal and efficient fund listing in Gibraltar using our experienced investor fund service.
So Anthony, we've met a couple of times in London, but I note that Red Ribbon also has a Gibraltar. Is it a Gibraltar domicile?
Yes, it is. No, we are in Gibraltar.
What is the Gibraltar angle?
Yeah. So yes, Gibraltar is it's not just attractive because of its climate. We see the regulatory environment in Gibraltar as being particularly beneficial for our business model, which is to offer, as I say, this cost-effective and frugal listing service, and that's because the regulatory environment under the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission is one that we would describe as so agile and specialised. So it has a rather specialised regulatory regime, which is focusing on sort of funds and things like insurance, but also it's agile in as much that it is able to respond quite quickly in ways that other larger regulators are not, and other financial jurisdictions are not. So I'll give you one example. Gibraltar is one of the first jurisdictions to pass regulation of the cryptocurrency world, and is looking at further details on that in a further iteration too. But also, I think on another level, it is a small territory, but that gives the regulator an advantage which I think really only applied in 19th century London, when the Bank of England was supervising a small number of banks, in as much that there was very personal contact, and the governor would raise his eyebrow or call you in for a cup of tea or something worse. And that is that the regulator does have personal oversight and meets people on a daily, weekly basis. And I think that gives the regulator an advantage in terms of the way they regulate. I think it gives us comfort in the regulatory strength of the jurisdiction. So those are particular advantages for us. And of course, the obvious ones are that it's a common law, English speaking British overseas territory, and is the only place in mainland Europe now which has unfettered access to the UK, because the funds that we are launching are subject to the regime of Gibraltar, which is incredibly closely aligned to the UK's own financial promotion regime. So we basically we are able to passport our funds into the UK, and they rapidly become investable by SIPs, IFAs, etc. So that is the particular appeal for us for Gibraltar.
Thank you very, very much for that walkthrough on the services that Red Ribbon provide. Very interesting, and look forward to speaking with you again shortly.
Many thanks, Mike.